Okay, so welcome to session LD. There you see the QR code there for feedback. That will be repeated at the end of the session. And today I'm delighted to say we've got, I'd like to say, an old friend of mine from many conferences all around the world, quite frankly, Glenn Anderson. Glenn retired from IBM. I think it was just after I showed him around Hursley House, which is what you can see behind me here. I hope that was, the two are not related, but
yeah,
he retired 2 or 3 years ago and has his own speaker business now. Speaker as in developing your speaker skills. So with that, I'll let Glenn carry on. Cheers, Glenn.
Thank you, Nick. This is a presentation about energy. And today I want to help you learn how to bring energy and confidence to your next presentation. And it doesn't matter what kind of presentation it is. Maybe you need to prepare a presentation for the team that you work with at work, or the department that you're part of. Or maybe you've been invited to speak at a user group meeting, your local user group, or at a vendor meeting, something like that. Or maybe your next presentation is outside of work. Maybe you need to present for your neighborhood organization or the charity that you volunteer for. It doesn't matter. Today, I have 5 tips for you that I promise you, if you execute on these, you will bring energy and confidence to your next presentation. So think about with me the last presentation that you saw that maybe was a dull presentation, a little boring. What was the speaker doing wrong? What things were not going well? Maybe the speaker lost you right at the beginning, right in those first couple minutes. They put you to sleep and you could tell that you were not going to be interested. Maybe the speaker had nothing really for you. As the presentation went on, you realized this speaker is not solving any of my problems. Maybe the speaker was putting up PowerPoint charts and reading them back to the audience. That's always a great thing. Maybe the speaker was just plain boring and was not bringing any energy or enthusiasm to the presentation. And these days, if the presentation is a virtual presentation like this one, I think these problems are exacerbated and they're even worse. A company called Edge Research took a survey about presentations, and they asked the question, what 1 or 2 things make a presentation excellent? And about 2,500 business professionals responded to this survey and answered this question. And when they gathered all of the suggestions that had come in as a response to this particular question here and collated it all together, it really kind of settled down to 3 things that people were saying make a presentation excellent. And those 3 things were enthusiasm, interaction, and clarity. So you think about these 3 things. Enthusiasm is something that you can learn. You can learn to bring enthusiasm. This is about how you are delivering your presentation with energy. Interaction is something you have to plan for. You really have to think about this in advance. You have to plan, how can I get the audience to interact with me, the speaker? How can I get the audience to interact with each other? But again, think about this. The people who took this survey said this is one of the main things that makes an excellent presentation. And then the third one was clarity. Clarity is all about how you develop your content. Is it organized? Is it concise? Does it make sense? When you're preparing a presentation, you want to think about, why are people going to come to your presentation? What is it that they are looking for? Some people, of course, want to learn something. That's one of the key things people want in a presentation. Maybe they wish to be inspired. Maybe they hope to be entertained. Think about it. Whenever you go to a presentation, don't you hope deep down that it entertains you a little bit, that it gives you a little bit of fun and entertainment? Maybe they have a need, and the audience hopes that you as the speaker will satisfy this need. Maybe the audience members have a desire to meet other people interested in the same subject. This might be true at a conference or a user group where the audience doesn't know each other. Know each other so much, and they want to meet other people that are interested in the same subject. Maybe the audience member is seeking a positive experience that they can take back to their team, that they can take back to their department and share. Maybe they're at the presentation because they were forced to be there by their bosses. It's a mandatory all hands meeting. Maybe they're handcuffed to their chairs, who knows? But I'm suggesting to you that as you are preparing your presentation, you should look at this list and maybe not the last two, but the first 6 things on this list and say, am I satisfying these needs as I prepare my presentation? Am I giving them something they're going to learn? Am I inspiring and entertaining them? Am I giving them a response to a need that they might have? Am I going to help them meet each other in the room, especially if they don't know each other? Am I going to give them a positive experience? Now, the last 2 things on this list, maybe you can't make those people happy at all, but if you can, I suppose, end early. End early always makes people happy. So maybe that's something you can do even for the people who are forced to be there by their bosses. Nick introduced me a moment ago very nicely. It's great to see my old friend, Nick. As he said, I worked for IBM for many, many years in technical training. I was an instructor in technical training. I was a speaker for IBM conferences and IBM technical events. I also did a lot of speaking for IT industry events like the conference that you're attending this week. I also have spent most of my adult life studying and performing improvisational comedy. And so when I retired from IBM a couple of years ago, I set up my own little one-man speaking business, and I combined those 2 things: my corporate experience at IBM, my years of experience performing improv comedy, and I reinvented myself as what I call the performance catalyst speaker. And I speak today on a variety of professional development subjects: teamwork, collaboration, leadership, communication skills, presentation skills. Okay, so let's get right to it. My 5 tips that I promise you are going to help you energize your presentation, give you confidence as you deliver your presentation. So here we go. Tip number 1, select your topic wisely. Now, if you have a choice about what you're going to talk about in your presentation, thinking about what do you enjoy talking about? Because if you pick a subject that is something you're excited about, you're enthused about, you enjoy talking about, that energy and that excitement is going to come through to the audience. Now, you don't always get that opportunity. Sometimes you are told what you're going to present about. For example, maybe your boss says, hey, Glenn, at the next department meeting, I want you to give us an update on the new software project that you're working on, and you really don't have a choice. But whether or not you have a choice about what you're talking about, this next point is crucial. What is the problem you are solving for your audience? When you are presenting, you are solving a problem for the audience. In fact, that is what you are doing. You have been asked to solve a problem for the audience. And so you're not just giving a speech. You have chosen the speech, the presentation, as a way to solve the audience's problem. And the key phrase here in this bullet is for the audience. It's not for you. You shouldn't simply be talking about something that you want to talk about. You should be talking about something that solves a problem for the audience. This is very, very key. Another way to say this is, what is the goal of your presentation? What do you want to accomplish? If you have this in view, it is so much easier as you develop the content of your presentation, as you're writing your speech, if you're optionally creating charts that you're going to use, knowing what you're trying to accomplish. So what? Now what? These are 2 questions that you should ask as you're developing your content, as you're selecting your topic. At the end of your presentation, so what? Will the audience understand how what you've talked about is important? What do you want them to know at the end of your presentation? And then what are the next steps? As a presenter, whenever you give a presentation, at the end, there should always be some action items, a call to action. What do you want the audience to do next? Now what? And then finally, don't get lost in the expert myth. You know, sometimes people will say to yourself, well, I would really love to talk about this new software product, or I'd love to talk about this way to tune a subsystem. But, you know, I'm not an expert. I really shouldn't be standing up in front of an audience saying these things. And if everybody followed that philosophy, there's probably only one person in the world that's ever qualified to talk about any particular topic, the foremost expert on that particular topic. And that makes no sense. So don't get lost in this expert myth. You need to convince yourself that you have something valuable to share, an experience. You've organized some thoughts in a way that's going to teach the audience something about a complex subject. I'll tell you a story along these lines. When I was working at IBM, I spoke many, many times. I was a regular speaker at the Share user group here in the United States. And IBM had a habit with Share of sending a lot of product developers to the Share conference so they could meet customers and interact with customers. And so there were often at these Share conferences, the guys who designed the code, the guys who wrote the code of the operating systems, of the subsystems that we were talking about. And so I would get up to present, and I would present some subject in the area, perhaps of the operating system tuning, of ZOS tuning. And I knew that there were people in the audience that were smarter than me. The person who wrote the code I was talking about might have been in the audience. And I could let this really spook me as a presenter. So I tried really hard to tell myself, hey, I teach this stuff to customers. I have an outline here. I have an approach. I have stories to tell. I am probably not the smartest guy in the room, but I have something valuable to deliver to my audience. This is the way you need to think. So don't get lost in the expert myth. So this is tip number one, how you select your topic. And again, the main takeaway here is that second bullet. You need to have an answer to the question, what is the problem you are solving for your audience? Tip number two, make the first 15 seconds of your presentation count. When you get up there and you get started and you start talking right off the bat, your audience is developing an impression of you in those first few seconds. They're getting an impression of you as a speaker. So as you stand up there in front of a room full of people, or as you come on here on camera on a virtual presentation, do you look comfortable? Do you look confident that you're prepared and ready to speak? Do you look nice? Yeah. Do you have nice clothes on? These things are going to make an impression for your audience. But particularly, the first words that you say are going to capture or not capture your audience, are going to make an impression. This is a lot like a race. Think about a race. Right before the starter says go to begin a race, that is the moment of most tension right then, because nothing has happened yet. The race hasn't started. We don't know how it's going to turn out. That is this moment of tension. And that is the same thing as you stand up, as you click on the camera, as you begin to make your presentation, that tension is there. And so you do not want to squander this time. How often do you see a speaker get up and they start by saying, thanks a lot for having me. Man, it's great to be here with you today. Hey, Nick, thanks for that great introduction. Didn't Nick do a nice job? He's hosting our session today. Let's give a hand to Nick. And you're just kind of, saying all these kind of welcoming kind of things. And I get it. You're trying to build some rapport with the audience. You want to come off as friendly. But I'll tell you, if that's the way you start your presentation, you are spending those first few seconds squandering that moment that may be your greatest opportunity to capture them and captivate them and bring them in to your presentation. So what makes a great presentation opening? It's those first 15 seconds. Be unique and memorable. And I would suggest that you memorize those first few lines. When I started this presentation today and Nick introduced me, what did I do? I said, this is a presentation about energy. I want to help you bring energy and confidence to your next presentation. So in those first few seconds, hopefully I was capturing your interest. I was telling you what we were going to talk about. I was telling you the problem that I was going to solve. I am going to teach you how to bring energy and confidence to your presentation. And so I memorized those first couple lines. And so I would suggest that that's what you should do as you are preparing your presentation and you come up with those first couple sentences that are going to be those unique and memorable first 15 seconds, write them out, memorize them, just like an actor would memorize some lines in a play, and then you have them and you deliver them with confidence. And that captures people in those first 15 seconds. Now, beyond that, the opening of your presentation is such an important part because, again, you want to help people understand the problem you're going to solve for them. You want to show them why it's valuable for them to give you their time, and you want to capture their interest so that they're excited and they see your enthusiasm and they want to hear what you have to say. And so there's a lot of neat things you can do in a presentation opening beyond those first couple sentences of opening. Remember, show some energy. You are on stage. I'm talking about energy in this presentation. And you need to realize that when you are standing in front of an audience, or when you are on camera here talking to a bunch of people over a Zoom session, you need to have the mentality that you are on stage. This is not a casual conversation with a colleague in the hallway. You're not sitting across the desk when someone just having a one-on-one conversation. You are on stage. So bring that energy. Tell a story. Often when I start my presentations, I have stories. I've collected stories. I've collected stories from my experiences performing improvisation. I've collected lots of great travel stories. I'm sure Nick has a bunch of great travel stories. All of us that travel for our jobs over the years have collected a lot of great travel stories. And so tell a story. Maybe it's a story that illustrates in some way as a metaphor, as an analogy of what you're going to talk about. But people love stories, and you'll capture their attention. Maybe once you've gotten past those first couple minutes and you've got the audience engaged, you want to get to know them a little bit, especially if you're in front of a live audience face to face. You can ask for show of hands. How many people have this product installed? How many people have never heard about this product in their life? And you get to know a little bit about the background of your audience. And so this is another way to use the opening to engage the audience. Sometimes when I'm doing a presentation like this in front of a face-to-face audience, I will actually ask people, what sucks the energy out of a presentation, and you get people to respond, and this gets them involved. Use exciting, interesting graphics like my silly little light bulb picture here in the lower right-hand corner of this chart. Again, that just brings a little life to what you're doing at the beginning. Starting with the big picture. If you've created a presentation that has kind of a big picture overview, and then you have a number of specific points that are going to illustrate that big picture, give them the outline in the presentation opening. That's a great way to kind of describe you. Hey, here's where we're going. Here's the big picture of what I'm going to be talking about, and here are the key points that I'm going to talk about. And so these are some ways that you can make your opening exciting and capture people's attention. But again, remember, it's about the first 15 seconds. Don't squander that time by just kind of wandering around with some useless greetings and conversations. Have something tight and specific that you want to capture your audience. Tip number 3, one of my favorite subjects, PowerPoint. You want to use PowerPoint charts, if you are going to use them, to add value to your presentation. I have to say that when you go back to my initial question, what sucks the energy out of a presentation? Improper use of PowerPoint is probably right at the top of that list. And so I want to talk to you for a few minutes here today in tip number 3 about how to use PowerPoint charts to bring value to your presentation. And this is the key message right here, folks. Slides are a visual aid to help you deliver a better presentation. And this is the thought you should keep in mind as you are designing charts. Okay, as you are thinking about what are the charts I want to have up on the screen as I go through my presentation, you need to think about those charts as a visual aid. So you need to imagine, this is what I'm going to be talking about. I'm on point number 2 of my 4 points. And this is what I'm talking about right now. And on the screen behind me, I want this because I can reference this to support what I am talking about. The slides become a visual aid to help you deliver a better presentation. Now, we need to pause for just a second here, and I don't want to give the wrong impression. You don't have to use charts. Sometimes I think in today's day and age, people feel like they cannot get up in front of an audience and give a presentation unless they have charts. It's like, I have to have charts or I'm not giving a presentation. And that is not true. So let's look here for a second. There are obviously pros to having slides, to having charts. Charts provide structure. They provide a structure to your presentation. They're kind of like a visual outline. The second bullet there, they keep track of where you are in your teaching journey. They help the audience keep track, and they help you, the speaker, keep track. I know sometimes speakers say, well, I need charts because the charts kind of help me remember what I want to talk about, and they keep me rolling through my presentation, hitting all the key points, and there's nothing wrong with that at all. So the charts keep track of where you are in your teaching journey. And then the third point there, of course, if you're giving a speech, it's pretty hard if all you're doing is talking verbally, if you don't have any backup charts, to express data or graphs of some kind, graphics or examples of a configuration picture or the parameters that you're coding, things like this. It's pretty hard to talk about those without having a background illustration to use. And so there are obviously many times where charts are very valuable to a presentation, but I caution you that there are also some negatives to using charts. And the primary negative, I think, is when people use the charts as kind of a replacement for their talk. Some people think that the charts make the presentation. I mean, have you ever met someone, or maybe you've experienced this yourself, where someone says, okay, Glenn, I need you to give a presentation, an update on what you're working on with your new software project. And so what do? I start creating charts. I open up a blank PowerPoint and I just start creating charts. And I feel like that's the way I'm writing my presentation. And that is absolutely backwards. You should create an outline for your presentation. You should figure out what it is you're going to talk about. You should have the whole speech in mind. And then how do I add some charts that I can use as visual aids? Slides sometimes become a crutch. I've seen speakers before, maybe you've seen a speaker before. It's a couple minutes before the session is going to start, and the speaker is up in front of the room and they've got their laptop and there's something wrong and they can't get their laptop connected to the projector, or the laptop's not booting up properly and they can't get their PowerPoint charts up and the PowerPoint charts aren't showing on the screen the right way. And the speaker refuses to start the presentation because they don't have their charts. Well, in that case, the charts have really become a crutch here. And so I would say a key point, you should ask yourself the question, can I give this presentation without the charts? One time I was speaking at an IBM event in Johannesburg, South Africa, and I was the first speaker of the morning. It was 9 o'clock in the morning, and there'd been a power outage, and there was no power in the hotel area where the conference center was. So I was in a breakout room. Fortunately, there was a window, so there was light coming in, so people could sit. They weren't sitting in total darkness, but I had no way to connect my laptop to a projector and put it up on the screen. And so it became time to start the presentation. And I just thought, okay, I'm just going to start giving the presentation without the charts. And so I just started talking about the subject, teaching the things I was going to teach. And I have to tell you, it was kind of a freeing experience. It was like I was not tied to the charts. I was just having this nice conversation with the people that had come to the session. And so slides should not become a crutch. So these are some of the negatives here about slides. So you need to make that decision. Now, I'm talking today about PowerPoint. A lot of us, I'm sure, are very familiar with PowerPoint, but I just wanted to mention there are a lot of other cool products that you can use to create slides. And I don't have time today, nor do I have the expertise to really talk about these, but I put a link at the bottom of the page here of your handout to a really cool website called Speaker Hub. Speaker Hub is a place where you can go to find speakers. I'm out there in the speaker database, but they have a section called Skill Camp. And so if you go to the Skill Camp section of Speaker Hub, there's an article out there on all these different software products that you can use to develop slides. And so if you're interested in exploring, maybe if you're a little overdone with PowerPoint and you'd like to find something else to work with, there are some other cool slides that I'm pointing out to you here. But this is the problem, folks. Death by PowerPoint. Text that continues on and on without any regard to your sensibilities. This text will ultimately be read line by the speaker, like I'm doing to you right now. It often gives the impression the speaker has no idea what's going on. Often the text is too small to be read by anyone over the age of 25, or is up there on the screen. The text is often wrong. The font is mixed up. There's misspellings. You spend way too much time looking at the chart and not enough time to hear what the person is saying, or even worse, you know what the speaker is saying because all they're doing is reading the words that are on the chart. By the time you get to the bottom of the chart, you're ready to commit suicide, snore loudly, wonder how that piece of food got stuck in the presenter's teeth. Notice if you're still reading all at the bottom there, if you're reading this line down there, you should yell, "I'm bored." See, there are lots and lots of things wrong with this chart. If a speaker is putting a chart like this up on the screen, there are many, many things that are wrong. Let's talk about a few of them. The first one is that the speaker has packed way too much information into that slide because they are confusing a presentation and documentation. That chart that I was just making fun of there is not a presentation, that is documentation. Again, remember, what's our overriding rule here? The slides should be a visual aid. That chart was not a visual aid. I mean, think about it. If everything that the speaker is going to say is right there on the chart, and the speaker is not adding any value beyond the words that are on the chart, why did the audience even need to come to the presentation? Stay home, download the PDF and read it. You're not getting any value from coming to the presentation. And so you should not be providing documentation up on the screen. You should be providing visual aids that support your presentation. So understand the difference. Now, often people try to also jam too much content into every slide. And so every slide becomes just jam-packed with content. And the other point here that it says the number of slides is not a problem. You should break things up. If you do have a lot of data, you do have a lot of information that you want on your charts, well, break it up and spread it out. Don't worry about the number of slides that you have. You don't want to jam too much. I mean, as the joke in the previous chart said, you jam too much onto the chart, the font's too small, you can't read it anyway. Have you ever been in a presentation where the speaker puts up a chart in a big meeting room and says, now I know you can't read this, but and why did they put the chart up there if nobody can read it? Here's a couple other interesting points. This is how you can deliver documentation to your audience. And this example here is using a feature of PowerPoint that is called speaker notes. See, the speakers often say to me when I tell them that you should not be using charts like the example I had making fun of a moment ago, they say, but I want to give all this information to the audience. I want the audience to take all this information home with me. And you should not be putting it up on the screen, but you can add it in the handout by using the function in PowerPoint called speaker notes. So in this example, the chart on top is what would be up on the screen, but in the handout, you've included a number of notes that support the chart using the speaker notes option. You might also provide an appendix at the end of your handout that has text, more text in it with more data, or perhaps you create two different versions of the slides. One version that is up on the screen that the speaker is using as a visual aid, and another version of the slides that are the handout that the audience takes away. Here's a couple other PowerPoint lessons. Remember, folks, The slide is your visual aid. And so you should not be simply reading the slide. I mean, again, if the speaker is simply reading the slide, then what is the value of the speaker? Why not just give the audience the slide and let them all read them and go home? And so you should not be standing there reading the slide. The words that you're saying are your speech. There's something additional on the chart that is serving as a visual aid. And remember this is a key point. When you put up a slide, the audience is reading the slide. And so this creates this conflict between you, the speaker that's talking, and people that are trying to listen to you, but they also just think maybe they should be reading the slide that you put up there. And so one way to control this is the way you've seen me do it here in this presentation. I use a feature of PowerPoint called animation that controls the info on the slide. So when I do this kind of thing, I have one bullet showing, and then when it's time to move on, I click and the next bullet comes up. That's a feature in PowerPoint called animation. And that way I can kind of lead the audience through. I don't put everything up on the screen at one time. And so the audience isn't reading the entire slide because the entire slide is not visible to the audience. Again, you want the audience looking at you. And so a key takeaway here is that the speech, the presentation is about you, the speaker. You are giving the presentation. The presentation is not your PowerPoint charts. The presentation is you. And the charts are a visual aid to support what you are saying. Tip number 4, applying your skills to try and survive these virtual presentations that we are all giving these days. Speakers like me, people who are used to traveling around, getting in front of live audiences, presenting. I mean, of course, our whole world was shut down with the global pandemic, and suddenly we found ourselves doing these kinds of virtual presentations all the time. And it really required a pivot to kind of relearn how to do this. The challenge with a virtual presentation is simply this: capturing and holding the attention of your remote audience. Why is this a challenge? I mean, I'm sure you realize as a remote audience, there are so many distractions. I have no idea what you are all doing right now. Maybe you have a pet that's running around the room that's kind of distracting you. Maybe you have children that are home. Maybe you're like the guy in the top there, just kind of staring out the window, wishing you were outside, because that would be a lot more fun than listening to this presentation. There are so many distractions of a remote audience. And when I have you in a room, when I'm giving a talk to you face to face, and I have you in a conference room, I have you in a meeting room, you know, those distractions don't exist. You probably did not bring your kids to the meeting. You probably did not bring your pet to the meeting. Maybe there's a window and you can kind of stare outside, but the challenge with a remote session is how to capture and hold the attention of your audience. I see I have something in the chat, Nick. Do I have a question I want to take here?
Sorry, just reminding myself to unmute myself. Now it's my first 15 seconds.
So that was yours. Okay. I saw the chat thing pop up there. And there was one of the challenges, ladies and gentlemen, of remote presentations is sometimes you never know for sure exactly what is going on. But when you think about how to approach this challenge, and how to survive these virtual presentations, I kind of divided my thoughts up into 2 areas here. The first is, and I mentioned this back at the beginning, that your basic presentation skills that you bring to a in-person, face-to-face presentation, I think are even more important when you're speaking virtually. Let's think about this for a second. For example, your content is king. Your content is everything. Because with all these distractions around, if the audience out there, your remote audience, is not interested in what you're talking about, then they're going to drift away. They're going to get up and go make a cup of coffee. They're going to go check on the pet in the next room. They're going to go look out the window for a while. Your content is everything. And right along with that, then your slides are more important than ever. I mean, think about this. I mean, right now, you're looking at your screen, And you can see me in this little square here. And so I'm trying to bring as much energy as I can through my camera to you. But so much of what's happening here is my slides and what you're seeing in the majority of your screen. And so how you design your slides, a little color, some pictures, some interesting graphics, more important than ever with a remote presentation. Your energy is in your voice. Again, I'm not standing in front of you. I can't run around and jump around in front of you, up in front of a meeting room like I could if we were face to face at Whittleberry Hall, like we used to be all those years. And so the energy for me is in my voice. I have to deliver my energy, enthusiasm through my voice, even more than I do perhaps when I'm with you face to face. My opening is more important than ever. Go back to my thoughts about the first 15 seconds. Again, because of all the distractions, if I don't tell you right off the bat what the problem is that I'm going to solve for you today, okay, what is it that I'm going to give you? How am I helping you solve your problem? You're going to drift off and go find something else to do in some other room of your home. Now, this is a really, really tough one. And this takes a lot of planning and a lot of thought. I mean, is there a way to focus on any kind of engagement with your audience? And I'll be honest, folks, I struggle with this one. I mean, you can try to use the chat. Maybe you can ask people to put things in the chat. You can ask a question and wait for some answers to appear in the chat to get a little interaction going between you and the audience. But when you're waiting for the chat, there's dead air. Or you're waiting for me to read what someone put into the chat. It's dead air. And so I struggle with this. I think this is a very conflicting thing. Some technologies have polling. You can build in a poll. So you can ask your audience a poll. You know, you have some A, B, C, D questions and see how people answer it. And maybe that can get a little engagement, a little audience engagement. But I'll tell you, I think this is a really tough one. But if there's any way that you can find to kind of get some audience engagement going with a virtual session, that's important. And then finally, a strong closing as well. I mean, you want to wrap up with a call for action. Maybe they've all drifted away. They're making coffee. They're playing with their cat. And at the end now, let's drag them all back here in the last couple minutes of my presentation and give them a strong closing. So these presentation skills that we talk about all the time are exacerbated. I think they're more important than ever when you're on a virtual presentation. But the other thing is there's a bunch of new skill that you have to understand when you're giving virtual presentations. There's this whole business with cameras and body language. I mean, again, I'm trying to deliver some energy through my body language, through the camera. But people who perform on TV and in movies will tell you that it takes extra energy when it's coming through the camera. The camera kind of cuts out some of the energy. And so you have to be even more enthusiastic and energetic when you're coming through a camera. There's also the whole issue of what's in the background. See, I'm sitting at my dining room table. You can kind of see my living room area behind me here, but you have to think about these kinds of things. If I'm standing in a meeting room, if I'm at Whittleberry Hall with all of you in a meeting room, I mean, I don't care about the background. The background is there. It's not my concern. Suddenly now it is my concern. Proper lighting. Do you have enough light? You don't want to set yourself up with a window behind you, and if there's bright light coming through that window, it kind of puts you in a shadow. That's not a good look. One thing you can do to play with this, I do this all the time, is if you're preparing to give a virtual presentation, like when I set up this morning to get ready to give this presentation, I wanted to make sure that the camera was in a good place and everything. And so I started up just a one-man Zoom meeting. I clicked on Zoom. I have Zoom installed on my laptop. I turned on the camera, or any way that you can turn on your camera. And I wanted to see what the camera was seeing, what it looked like. So I was prepared when it was time to give my presentation. Understanding the technology. This is Zoom. We've all gotten kind of used to Zoom, but I got to tell you, in the last couple of years, giving all these virtual presentations, I've probably encountered 10 different software products that are webinar products, virtual conference products, and they're all a little different. So you got to make sure you've studied up and practiced and you know your technology, again, so you look sharp. Especially with a virtual presentation, I think people want to know how long it's going to take. Now, today you're in a conference agenda environment. This is a 1-hour presentation, you know that. But if you're talking to your team, if you're giving a presentation to your department and everybody's at home, everybody's remote, people want to know, how long is Glenn going to talk? How long does Glenn expect me to give him my attention? And so that's even more important, I think, virtually. And then this is the one that really is hard for me. You are in charge of your space. I mean, I'm in charge. It's my Wi-Fi, it's my internet, it's my camera, it's my microphone, it's my room here. I'm in charge of all of this. And when I'm standing in a room at Whittleberry Hall giving a presentation, I don't have all this stuff to worry about. And sometimes this can kind of play with your head. And so even more, you need to be well prepared so that you're ready to take on the challenge of this entire virtual space that you are in charge of. And so there are some skills that you need to understand. So take these two lists that I've given you here and think about these things the next time you're getting ready to give a virtual presentation. And finally, tip number 5. This is my favorite point of all. Use your power as a speaker to not be boring. I love this guy. My topic is how to give a presentation without losing your audience's attention. The end. Thank you for coming. Maybe that's the only way you can do it and maintain the interest of your audience. Folks, it's all about this. The answer to most attention problems between you and your audience is power. You have to understand that you as a speaker have power. If you're standing in front of a live audience face to face, you're up in front of the room, they're sitting down, you're standing up, you've got the microphone, you've got the screen, you have power. Even now, as I sit here presenting to you virtually, I mean, I can't see any of you, you're not all on screen, I'm on screen, my mic is unmuted, my camera's turned on, I have power. And it's how you use that power as a speaker that prevents you from becoming a dull and boring speaker. How to use your power as a speaker. Let me give you some suggestions. First of all, set the pace. People love rhythm. This is why the drummer is so important in a band. People love rhythm. And so people want to know, what is the pace of your presentation? I've got 4 points for you today. I'm going to spend about 10 minutes on each point. And it tells people what the rhythm of the presentation is going to be, and that keeps them from being boring. People love, like my title today, 5 tips to energize your presentation skill. So you knew this is a 1-hour presentation. Glenn's got 5 tips. You can see in advance what the rhythm of the presentation is going to be. And this is how you set the pace. But I got to tell you, if you have given people the rhythm, if you have set the pace, and then you don't stick to that pace, people are going to be bored. So if I told you I had 5 tips to energize your presentation skill, and we have a 1-hour presentation, and 45 minutes into this, I'm still on tip number 1, I have broken the rhythm. I have broken the pace, and probably most of you have tuned out. So you use the pace, the rhythm of your presentation. This is part of the power as your speaker to keep your audience from becoming bored. Direct their attention. When things start to wane, when there's a little too much data and people are starting to get a little foggy and starting to fade away and you're coming off as a little boring, direct their attention. Let me tell you a story. Boy, everybody snaps right back to it. Let me give you an example. Wow, people suddenly click back in again. I'm directing their attention. And even more important, you need to use the PowerPoint charts, if you're using them, that you created as a visual aid to direct their attention. And the way you do that is you have to use the charts, the visual aids that you've created. How many times have you seen a speaker that pushes the button, the PowerPoint chart comes up, and then the speaker starts talking and they're basically ignoring what's on the chart? And maybe there's a bunch of bullets on the chart. Maybe there's some bullets in a picture and a graphic and a configuration or a chart, a graph or something like this. And the speaker is just sitting there talking away and they're not paying any attention to the chart. And the chart is kind of hanging behind them like wallpaper. And now the audience doesn't know what to do. Should I listen to the speaker? Should I read the chart? Is the speaker talking about the chart? Which bullet is the speaker on? And this is what makes PowerPoint so mind-numbing. So if you're going to use PowerPoint charts as a visual aid, you need to direct their attention. Walk over to the screen if you can. Use a laser pointer. Here's what I'm talking about. Look at this chart. I'm directing your attention to this bullet, to this graphic, to this configuration, to this parameter. I'm directing their attention. When you don't use that power that you have as a speaker, the audience gets bored. Folks, play the part. You are a star. For the 45 minutes that you're up in front of your team, up in front of your department, virtually or in person, you are a star. And so if you get up there in front in person and the microphone that's clipped to your shirt keeps falling off, or you trip over the power cord that's got your laptop plugged in, or you drop your notes all over the floor, or you just look like you're a deer in the headlights and you don't know what you're doing, you are not playing the part. Or if you're on a screen like this on a camera and suddenly I'm flipping my notes around and it's making a rustling noise into the microphone on my laptop that sounds like my house is on fire, you are not the star. So play the part. When you come on with confidence and energy and you are ready to go and you are prepared and you've got your act together, that keeps the audience from becoming boring. Play the part, folks. You are a star when you are in front of your audience. Know what happens next. You know, I'm the only guy in this presentation right now that knows what's going to happen when I push the button here that I'm pushing on my keyboard to move the charts along. If I'm standing in front of you doing a live presentation at Whittleberry Hall, I've got the little remote clicker, you know, in my hand. I'm the only guy in the room that knows what's going to happen when I push that button. And that's power. And you need to use that power. You need to have practice so you know what's going to happen next when you push the button. And you can have nice, smooth transitions. You can set up what the next picture is going to be, what the next chart is going to be. When you do those kinds of things and you know what happens next, you're using your power as a speaker. Get the audience involved. We already talked about this. If there's any way, it's a lot easier when you're face-to-face in front of a live audience. You can do Q&A. You can have people turn to each other and talk to each other for a moment. You can put a problem up on the board and discuss together with the audience how you're going to solve it. There's so many different ways you can get the audience involved when you're face-to-face. Again, a lot harder to do when you're in a virtual presentation, but if you can use polling, or even things sometimes like showing a video or getting people to drop answers in a chat, if you feel comfortable doing those kind of things, you get the audience involved. Again, that keeps them from becoming bored. And finally, always end early. You know, nobody complains when the presentation ends a few minutes early, but when the presentation runs over, everybody gets bored and everybody stops listening. You've probably seen this before. The speaker's up in front, they're going along, they're clicking through their charts, they pause, 45 minutes into the presentation, they pause and they look at their watch and they realize they've got 10 minutes left and they're on chart 8 of 47. So what do? They speed up. They start clicking through the charts. They're desperate to try to get to the end. It goes past the time that the presentation is supposed to end. They're still up there trying to finish. People get up and are walking out. If it's a virtual presentation, people are logging off, clicking off, walking away, and it never ends well. And so you always want to make sure you are well rehearsed, you are well practiced, you know how much time you have left. As I'm giving this presentation right now, I have my watch sitting down here next to me so that I know how much time I have left, because you don't want to run over, because I know everybody's going to get bored. They're not going to listen to me any longer anyway. So one of the ways to use your power as a speaker is to always wrap up, certainly on time, but if you can, even a few minutes early. That sends people away with some energy. This is so important, folks. These 6 points here: using your power as a speaker to eliminate boredom. Set the pace. People love rhythm. Direct their attention. Use the charts. Tell a story. Give an example. Play the part. You're a star. Know what happens next and use your power as you're going to push the button and make the next chart appear. Get the audience involved and end a little early. That's using your power as a speaker to prevent your audience from becoming bored. I have included in my handout, and you can download the handout from the conference website, some really cool books here if you want to read a little bit about how to be a better presenter. I would particularly call your attention to the fourth book there, Confessions of a Public Speaker. Really fun, entertaining book. Scott Birkin, he's a professional conference speaker. He talks on creativity, innovation, things like that. But he's written a book about many of his experiences as a public speaker, and you can learn a lot about how to be a public speaker from reading that book, and it's very entertaining. And then I provided some websites down there. Those first couple websites are places you can go to find cool pictures that are not copyrighted, so they're free to use. The Beyond Bullet Points website goes along with the Beyond Bullet Points book that Cliff Atkinson has written. A lot of great tips there. Toastmasters, if you're familiar with the Toastmasters organization, that's a great way, perhaps in your town where you live, if there's a local Toastmasters, if you want to practice and get better as a public speaker, and they have a great website as well. And then that final one there, speakerhub.com/skillcamp, I mentioned this earlier, there's just a ton of articles out there about all aspects of being a better public speaker. And so I would draw their attention to any of those. All right, Nick, do we have any questions? If you have any questions and you want to drop them into the chat, I would be happy to take them now. I have just a couple things left before I wrap up, but before I do, if there are any questions, I would be happy to take them now.
Not so much questions as observations that you clearly have paranormal powers, because you could tell that people had cats crawling over their laptops at home without even being able to see them, or kids. So that was it. It's been endorsement commentary rather than questions that have been coming up.
Okay. Well, here's my summary then. Again, is what did I say? End with a strong closing. So as I remind you of these 5 things, I hope they've been useful to you, and I hope you take them away. Choosing your topic, solving a problem for the audience, getting your first 15 seconds memorized and together. Figure out how to use PowerPoint charts as a visual aid. Apply all your skills to do a better job with virtual presentations, and then use your power as a speaker to not be boring. This is one of my favorite quotes here. They may forget what you said, but they will never forget how you made them feel. And if you adapt these 5 things I've given you here, you're going to give your audience energy and confidence, and they're going to walk away feeling great. Okay, as promised, here is the feedback sheet. And so again, I appreciate feedback. The conference organizers, of course, always appreciate feedback. Let me put a little plug in here. If you like these kind of professional development sessions beyond the technical content of GSE, tell the organizers in your feedback, and maybe they'll include a few more of these kinds of things next year. And then the last page of my handout, I have my email and I have my website. And so I'd love to hear from you. This is what I'm doing these days in my partial retirement. So I'd love to get in touch with you. Check out my website. There's some fun videos out there that you can watch as well. Nick, that about wraps it up for me.
Well, Glenn, we've had, I think John Barrett has attended one of my presentations in the past, because he's asking you, so what's the worst presentation you've had to endure? Without naming.
Yeah, that Nick Garrett presentation at TechU a few years ago, that was really something. This is going to sound bad, and I don't work for IBM anymore, so I can get away with saying this, but I got to tell you, some of the worst presentations I ever saw were IBM executives up in front of our conference audiences. And they were breaking all these rules. And the major rule they broke is they often had PowerPoint charts that probably some assistant designed for them, that were just jammed with information, bullets, pictures, charts, configurations. And they would push the button and the chart would go up on the screen. And then the executive ignores the chart and just starts talking. And you're trying to figure out, should I listen to the executive? Are they using the chart? And it just wears you out after a while. And I got to tell you, some of the IBM executives I saw were just the worst at that. And it just made the presentation so dull and boring. So they can shoot me now, but I don't work for IBM anymore. So I guess I can get away with that.
Well, I hope the speakers in the next set of technical sessions, we're all present in this session, Otherwise, they're going to get really
Let me tell you a quick
feedback.
story. I gave a session similar to this at one of the tech U's, and like maybe I gave it in the morning, and then later in the day, somebody stopped me in the hall and they said, you know, I went to the next session after your session, and that guy did everything wrong. Everything you talked about, they did wrong. Made me feel bad as a conference organizer, but you don't want to hear that.
Well, Glenn, thank you ever so much. You've had loads of comments of thank you and very interesting presentation come up in the chat. Appreciate you giving up your time. I know you had to get up a little bit earlier than you're used to in your retirement these days, but thank you for doing
I know there's a serious technical detail to follow here. So good luck to all of you in your jobs, and hope to see you maybe in person, face to face at a GSE conference down the line. That would be fun.
All right, Glenn. And with that, I'll pull this session to a close. Please fill in the feedback. And one last time, great to see you again, Glenn. And thank you.
You bet, Nick.
Bye-bye.
Bye.